The nervous system is important for the human body as it allows for us to process information from the environment and generate an appropriate response. In other words, a stimulus will trigger a response. The nervous system is also responsible for integration, which includes emotions, learning, as well as memories to activate a response. Hence, the nervous system is divided into parts that are responsible for each function.
There are many parts to a brain with different functions which can be confusing to students.
The objective of this video is to understand the functions and processes of the nervous system and to further understand the parts of the brain that are involved.
The brain has three main parts: the cerebrum, cerebellum, and brainstem. Cerebrum is divided into several lobes: the frontal lobe, parietal lobe, occipital lobe, and temporal lobe. The frontal lobe is the largest section of the brain located in the front of the head. The frontal lobe is involved in the personality characteristics and movement. Recognition of smell usually involves parts of the frontal lobe. The parietal lobe is the middle part of the brain. The parietal lobe helps a person identify objects and understand spatial relationships. The parietal lobe is also involved in interpreting pain and touch in the body. The occipital lobe is the back part of the brain that is involved with vision. Lastly, the temporal lobes are at the sides of the brain. These temporal lobes are involved in short-term memory, speech, musical rhythm, and some degree of smell recognition.
Now we will talk about cerebellum. Cerebellum is located under cerebrum. Its function is to coordinate muscle movements, maintain posture, and balance. Besides that, the brainstem acts as a relay center connecting the cerebrum and cerebellum to the spinal cord. The brainstem consists of pons, medulla oblongata, and midbrain. The pons is a deep part of the brain and contains many of control areas for eyes and face movement. The medulla oblongata is the lowest part of the brainstem, and it is the most vital part of the entire brain. It contains many important control centers for heart and lungs. The midbrain is a portion of central nervous system associated with vision, hearing, motor control, sleep and wake cycles, arousal, and temperature regulation.
The spinal cord is a large bundle of nerve fibers located in the back that extends from the base of the brain to the lower back. The spinal cord carries messages to and from the brain and the rest of the body. The diencephalon is found just above the brainstem between the cerebral hemisphere. It forms the wall of the third ventricle. It is divided into three parts, which are epithalamus, thalamus, and hypothalamus. Epithalamus contains the pineal gland that helps regulate the sleep-wake cycle by secreting the hormone melatonin. Thalamus receives sensory information from other areas of the nervous system and sends this information to the cerebral cortex. It is also important for processing information related to movement.
The functional areas of the cerebral cortex can be divided into two main areas, motor areas and sensory areas. The motor cortex can be further divided into four areas, including the primary motor cortex, the premotor cortex, the frontal hemisphere, and broca area. The primary motor cortex is anterior to the central sulcus. Its function is to monitor the execution of movement. Premotor cortex is an association motor area that helps organize complex movement and send the plan to the primary motor cortex. The frontal hemisphere is anterior to the premotor cortex and help guide voluntary eye movement, whereas the broca area is located only in the left cerebral hemisphere and help regulate motor movement for speech production. Sensory area are areas of brain that receive and process sensory information. The brain sensory area include primary sensory cortex association area and multimodal association area. The primary sensory area are the primary cortical regions of the five brain sensory systems, which included the primary somatosensory area, the primary visual area, the primary auditory area, the primary gustatory area, and the primary olfactory area. The main somatosensory area is found in the postcentral gyrus. This is the main sensory receptive area for the somatic sensation. The primary visual area, known as striatal cortex, is located at the posterior pole of the occipital cortex, which is responsible for the processing of visual stimuli. The primary auditory area is located at the temporal lobe and is a region of the brain that processes sound and thus contribute to the ability of hear. Besides, the sensory association regions are the cerebral cortex outside the primary areas. The association areas include the somatosensory association areas, visual association areas, facial recognition areas, auditory association areas, orbitofrontal cortex, and Wernicke areas. Wernicke areas is a region in the left temporal and parietal group that help to interpret the meaning of speech. The other association area included the prefrontal cortex and limbic association area. Prefrontal cortex, also known as the frontal association area, plan for voluntary activities and also play a role in decision-making and personality traits. The limbic association area is located on the medial side of the frontal lobe. It helps form memories and translate them into motor reaction and process emotions and guide emotional responses.
The brain and spinal cord are covered and protected by 3 layers of tissue, called meninges. From the outermost layer inward, they are the dura mater, arachnoid mater, and pia mater. Dura mater is a strong, thick membrane that closely lines the inside of the skull. Its 2 layers, the peristyle and meningodura, are fused and separate only to form venous sinuses. The dura creates little folds or compartments. There are 2 special dural folds, the falx and the tentorium. The falx separates the right and left hemispheres of the brain, and the tentorium separates the cerebrum from the cerebellum. Pia mater hugs the surface of the brain following its folds and grooves. The pia mater has many blood vessels that reach deep into the brain. The space between the arachnoid and pia is called the subarachnoid space. It is here where the cerebrospinal fluid bathes and cushions the brain.
The brain is made up of 2 types of cells, nerve cells, also known as neurons, and glia cells. There are many sizes and shapes of neurons, but all consist of a cell body, dendrites, and an axon. The neuron conveys information through electrical and chemical signals. Try to picture electrical wiring in your home. An electrical circuit is made up of numerous wires connected in such a way that when a light switch is turned on, a light bulb will beam. A neuron that is excited will transmit its energy to neurons within its vicinity. Neurons transmit their energy or talk to each other across the tiny gap called the synapse. A neuron has many arms called dendrites, which act like antennae picking up messages from other nerve cells. These messages are passed to the cell body, which determines if the message should be passed along. Important messages are passed to the end of the axon, where sacs containing neurotransmitters open into the synapse. The neurotransmitter molecules cross the synapse and fit into special receptors on the receiving nerve cell, which stimulates that cell to pass on the message.
Glia is a Greek word meaning bloom. They are the cells of the brain that provide neurons with nourishment, protection, and structural support. There are about 10 to 50 times more glia than nerve cells, and are the most common type of cells involved in brain tumors. Astroglia or astrocytes are the caretakers. They regulate the blood-brain barrier, allowing nutrients and molecules to interact with neurons. They control homeostasis, neuronal defense and repair, scar formation, and affect electrical impulses. Oligodendroglial cells create a fatty substance called myelin that insulates axons, allowing electrical messages to travel faster. Ependymal cells line the ventricles and secrete cerebrospinal fluid, also known as CSF.
In conclusion, the brain is one of the most complex and biggest organ of the body. The brain is divided into 3 main parts: cerebrum, cerebellum, and brainstem. These parts all work together to perform many different functions, from learning to maintaining body's posture. The occipital, temporal, parietal, and frontal lobes. These lobes are involved with vision, smell, short-term memory, personality characteristics, and more. The cranial nerves of the brain allow for communication with the body through the spinal cord. Lastly, the 2 cells in the brain, the glia and nerve cells or neuron, are essential for proper brain function to send and receive electrical signals.